The
Okay.
point of all of this is so that we trust our power and trust our choices. So karma is not a punishment. Karma is an opportunity for balancing and learning. We cannot learn at all in one lifetime. And mostly the reason why we don't learn at all is because we're kind of asleep at the wheel of life.
Today, I'd like to welcome Mira Kelley to the show. Mira, welcome.
Hello, so wonderful to be with you. Thank you.
I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. I have shared multiple times on many platforms that I've recently learned of a past life. And so my curiosity around past lives is just over the top. But before we dive into that, I know you are a past life regression specialist.
I prefer calling it regressionist. Specialist sounds,
Regressionist.
yes, very, very specialized. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Past life regressionist. But I understand that you weren't always in this line of work. So would you start by sharing your journey of how you landed in reincarnation and past life regression work?
I would love to. In fact, I'm so thrilled that you're in this place of discovery because this is making me remember my passion when I discovered past life regression. And I was working as an attorney. I was a corporate attorney working in a large law firm, living in New York City. And so imagine the busyness of life. And amidst all of that, I was able to connect through past life regression with past life regression as a way to heal physically. I had a very painful jaw condition that I was told I would have for the rest of my life. And I couldn't even imagine the thought of having chronic pain, intense chronic pain for the rest of my life. So I was looking to remedy the condition with everything I can think of, right? And nothing was working. And then one day I remembered past life regression. And I had experienced my first regression when I was a teenager, and it was a profound experience. But, you know, when I was a kid, that's as far as it went with that one experience. But now that I needed past life regression, I really went for it as a way of healing, right? As a way of answers, as a way of figuring out what seemed impossible on a 3D reality, right? Matter and working with the body. And so I experienced a past life where I was a very strong and powerful physically man, a tall man who was very strong in terms of body and physique. And as this man, I had chains around my wrists and my ankles and my jaw. And the biggest the most painful thing about this chain around my jaw, this cuff around my jaw, was that when it was put together, it was hurting right where the main pain spot was in Mira's body in this life. And I experienced a lot of cathartic and emotional release around this life, right? A lot of learning emotionally, comparing my present place in life, feeling very much, trapped in this experience of the life I have created as an attorney, right, working. And so it was such a cathartic experience that the next day the pain was gone. It was over. And it always happens that way when people have a past life regression. They always go to what they need the most, what will liberate them, what will give them exactly what will unlock things for them. And so that set me on a path where now I wanted to learn more. I wanted to practice. I wanted to be so deep into that field, into that experience. And so it took me a few years to fully trust this journey and this desire, because, at first the question was like, yeah, but how am I going to make this work? Right? Like, I don't even know what to do here, even though the desire for regressing other people was so strong. And eventually I was able to leave the practice of law and do past life regression and full time and write a book and work with people all over the world and all of that, right? And travel and teach, all of it. And so it started with that experience. And so a significant part of my journey is how people come to me and say, you were able to transition and find your purpose. Show me, tell me how. Or I need physical healing. How do I do that, right? But what I love so much about regression is that in addition to those two pieces, regression can be used on anything, literally whatever the person is going through, whatever the question is, whatever they have in mind.
Wow. I love that. That is so fascinating. There's so many things that you just said that I want to dive into. So I don't know where to go first because it's all so alive. But what I wanted to touch on was the passion and how you experienced so much passion through your own experience that it was enough for you to leave being an attorney to follow this path. That is so amazing to me, and I'm just so grateful that that's happened for you so that you can do the work that you do. And you also mentioned work with people around the world. So I remember from watching you on several other podcasts and also by just going to your website, you worked with Wayne Dyer, is that correct? Would you share about that experience?
I would love to. Yes. Wayne Dyer has been such a wonderful friend and mentor. And I reached out to him to offer him the experience of past life regression. And he had and the reason why I did that is because I was in the audience when he was publicly announcing for the first time that he has leukemia. And it didn't, it didn't resonate one way or another. I was feeling compassion for another human being going through a hard time, but nothing specifically struck a chord for me. And then eventually I was talking to a friend, and the friend mentioned something about Wayne Dyer going on a tour to experience the miraculous. And I had this moment of intuition of, oh, he's really ready to heal from leukemia. And so my friend encouraged me to reach out and offer him a past life regression. And of course, I had so much resistance because I was a lawyer, right? I didn't have a business card that said regressionist, right? I didn't have a website. Who was I? No one, just somebody who loved past life regression. And so I eventually reached out, and him and I were able to work together on Maui, and he had a profound experience, profound experience. He really connected with a lot of soul wisdom. He was able to answer a lot of questions for himself, and he took a small part of that session and he included it in his book Wishes Fulfilled. And so I have been extremely fortunate that he has been such a advocate of my work, right? Because his powerful voice was lent towards work with Mira, right? Because she did this incredible thing for me, and I was definitely a part of his healing from leukemia experience. And so I've been very blessed to have the connection with him and the support from him. And so I coming into this world, it was also just so easy, if that makes sense to you, in terms of, because you spoke about the passion. So coming into the world of past life regression, it was just so effortless to connect with the experience with guiding people. It was never something I needed to learn. It was already there. It was kind of like remembering. And so years later, many years later, I was talking to a friend and saying to the friend about this specific past life. And I never talk about this life. I'm not going to tell you the story because it's so big that I'm not prepared to explain the details of it, right? But I trust this friend, and the friend said, isn't it interesting, in that lifetime you were so fascinated by Reincarnation. No wonder in this life you so naturally tapped into the past life regression experience. And I literally imagine I just sat back and I was like, how is it that I never connected the dots that way, right? How is it that I never saw it so clearly? And so it totally makes sense to me now, having had other lifetime experiences where I was deeply in the mystical ideas of working with reincarnation as a concept, how in this life it was effortless to slip into. And this is definitely the case for all of us. We have gifts and talents that are literally sitting on the sidelines, and you can use past life regression as a way to tap into them and open up the potential into who we are now.
Yeah, that's so fascinating. It's so true that in my experience, I can agree with you that when we're in alignment and following our passion, it's effortless and it just happens. It unfolds naturally. So thank you for sharing that. I want to go back to just how fun it was to hear you say that you were working as an attorney, you had an intuitive hit that he was ready to heal. So you reached out and he said yes. So I love that. That's also the perfect picture of effortless. Um,
Most
yeah.
definitely. But then I also wonder on a soul level, what is the connection him and I shared through other incarnations? Because a couple of years before this moment, when I was just, a little bookworm diving deep into the books and the experiences of past life regression on my own, not even dreaming dreams of being able to work with other people, I had a dream, a nighttime dream, right? Not a daytime daydreaming. I had a dream in which Wayne Dyer was teaching me the ropes of being a spiritual teacher. So he wasn't being a life coach saying this is how you manifest, or this is how you forgive, or this is how you change a relationship. He was simply teaching me the business of being a spiritual teacher. And so I woke up from that dream and really, really discombobulated and thinking to myself, isn't that interesting? Right? Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
But it meant nothing. I didn't know what to do with it. I just remembered it because it was, it stood out so much. So that makes me wonder what the mystery of who we are,
Yeah.
Each one of us has these moments in time, which then looking back, you say, oh, that makes sense. But it also makes me think time is then simultaneous, because this thing that is called Mira's transition and being able to be of service and her purpose has tentacles throughout all directions of time and space, right?
Mhm.
Imagine an ant looking up on an elephant. The ant doesn't see the whole elephant, right? So in that moment of time, I couldn't see how this whole thing is going to spread throughout unfoldments of moments. But yeah, so it's really fascinating when we start thinking about time, because that's something else that I teach and work with, the idea of parallel lives, the idea that reincarnation is actually not a linear development from one lifetime to the other. Hopefully a soul learns a little more. Hopefully they don't mess up too big, right? Otherwise we'll have to pay off karma. It's actually simultaneous lifetimes, all of them happening much like the lanes of a highway, right next to each other, parallel to each other. So that's actually what I wrote a book on, right? Beyond past lives, going into parallel lives. So it's really fascinating to think about that.
Yeah, I love that you just brought up parallel lives, because my questions that I really wanted to dive in with you today, I think kind of sort of have to do with that. And so my first question around that is, I've just recently remembered one past life, and I know that we've had many, many, right? We're infinite. And I know I find myself really curious. Can we incarnate at the same time in more than one reality or body? Would you talk about that for a little bit?
Oh, isn't it fun when we ask that question? Because that means that maybe 3 blocks away from me, there is a middle-aged man with a mustache who may be, a counterpart of mine. And what if I meet him while, I'm going out for a walk? And
Mhm.
actually, that happens for people. Sometimes they do meet their counterparts, and sometimes they never do. And so I see it as a time-saving device, if you will, or practical point of our souls taking a practical approach, because something about a certain historic period is very favorable for the soul's development, whatever it is, whether it's the economy, whether it's a war going on that will provide, right, whatever it is. And that's how actually the whole thing started for me. I worked with a client who experienced a bunch of lifetimes, all happening on top of each other in the same 120-year period. And so I remember I guided him through a lifetime, and then the next lifetime he started narrating for me was literally he was being born in the middle of the first lifetime. And he was very specific with dates, with names, with places. That's how I was able to tell what's happening, right? The discrepancy, well, discrepancy in quotes, in my limited way of understanding. And I was really, as I was guiding him during the regression, I had this moment of being even afraid to breathe. I kind of leaned back and I was like, oh, I just want to disappear, because I was afraid to even make this tiniest little sound, because what if he pays attention to that, and what if the conscious mind for him kicks in, and what if he says, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense, let me put the brakes on it? Because during the process of past life regression, the person is fully conscious. They don't, they don't blink out of awareness. The person is fully aware. They're aware I'm in the room. They're aware of their body. They're aware of the experience. And so he didn't stop the narration. In fact, he kept going with a few more lifetimes, all overlapping. And later on, when I spoke with his higher self, I said, what is happening? Oh, this does not make sense to me. And I was told, this is just simply the concept of there being no time, and the soul uh, being able to create lifetimes in any order, in any stacking. And so it's really quite mind-blowing to think that, for example, somebody who lives in a third world country trying to survive, and working a little piece of land to produce some crops so that they can meet their starvation, and that person is always thinking about Americans and their giant burger size portions, right? And that person has a counterpart who is a lady sitting in Ohio, and she has a couple of 100 pounds extra on her, and she's afraid of starvation. She's afraid of being poor and dying homeless, right? So the soul is always working out on a theme in a parallel way, right? There's an interconnection between our lifetimes. And with parallel lives, it's even more apparent, right? The connections are even more apparent. So I remember working with another client who experienced being both the lady of the manor, who had an accident on a horse. Something wasn't quite right with the saddle, so she slipped and fell, and she died. And she was also the stableman who didn't quite fix things right. And so the soul was literally having the experience from both ends of that little piece of drama. Same with yet another client who experienced being both the husband and the wife in a relationship, right? And their emotional struggles and challenges and lessons. So it's quite fascinating to think how there's so much more. There's so much more than what we think it's even possible. So the moment I started thinking I understand regression, I have a profound experience with a client, which opens up a whole another level of, oh, I didn't imagine that. Oh my God.
Wow, that is so fascinating to imagine that a husband and a wife, or the stable guy and the person who died from it not being put correctly, that's really I don't know the word for it, but it really paints a picture of just, how much our souls are wanting to experience everything.
Right?
Yeah. And I'm curious about, so that was about parallel lives. Now, one thing I've been wondering in my recent discovery of my own past life, one of them is, is it a, is it like a piece of our soul that reincarnates, or is it the entire soul that reincarnates? I don't even know if I'm asking the question correctly. I'm not really sure.
It's a perfect question, and it really makes sense. So a piece of the soul, but it's also whole and complete on its own. So there's nothing missing, nothing is less than. It's perfectly a whole into itself, and yet a whole that fits, a whole that belongs, if that makes sense. An imperfect analogy will be my fingers, right? So my pinky finger is part of the hand, and it's whole and separate, but at the same time it's part of the hand. Of course it cannot exist without the hand, but we get the point, right? So it's actually a very good question that you asked.
I love that. That just, it adds to the benefits that I've been getting from learning about this past life, and it just seems so expansive that
I would love to hear the story of your past life if you haven't shared it, and if you would love to share. I would love to hear, because then we'll have something more specific to talk about, right?
yeah, I have shared it, but I will share again. So I actually have not done a regression, and I do have a couple of questions for you around it, because I haven't actually remembered pieces of it. Maybe I have, and I'm just not aware of them. But what I have found out is that, so I got sober December 7th, 2013. And I had tried for 5 years to get sober, and I was never successful. Sometimes I would just give up. I'm just this way. And on December 7th, 2013, something different happened. I've been sober since then. And on my year sobriety birthday, I woke up just like in disbelief that I had made an entire year sober. And at that point, that point in my life, I would turn the news on in the morning as background noise. And so as I was getting ready, I heard the news talking about Pearl Harbor, and it clicked that I got sober the same day Pearl Harbor was bombed. So a series of synchronicities that happened and developed over time. Fast forward to March of 2023, this year, I went to Hawaii, and part of my planning was, do I go to Pearl Harbor? I'm not really a tourist. Like, I don't really want to, I'm not really a history buff either. But as it got closer and closer, I was like, there's no way that I can be on Oahu and not go to Pearl Harbor. So I went, and as soon as I got there, I had seen pictures, images from dreams that I'd had my whole life of Hawaii. And when I got on the boat to go to the USS Arizona, I started crying, just crying. Not sadness, there was intense energy, and I was in this, how is this the day I chose to live when so many people died this day? Tears just streaming down my face. I'm getting chills. I do every time I talk about it. I got onto the memorial, still crying, and I looked out onto the USS that's underwater, and I just felt like I was home. And I knew in that moment it was a past life. So I got back, I did some research. I've interviewed some mediums through this podcast, through my own dreams. I've asked in my dreams to be shown. And so that's how I discovered, actually, I know his name, Harold Wyatt Hope. He was born June 10th, 1922. He died when he was 19 on the USS Arizona. He's never been found. A lot of them have never been found. They're still underwater. And, I had some questions about, remembering So I've not done a regression, but I'm curious if we have to do a regression. Is it required to do a regression to remember parts of our past lives, or are there other ways that we can?
I wouldn't call it required. I would call it, is it exciting to you? Because what regression will give you is a ton more details, a
Mhm.
ton more sense of wonder and fascination, because then the conscious mind will be involved, right? The conscious mind will see the scenes and experience the emotions. I worked with a woman named Kathy Bird, and Kathy came to a workshop that I was teaching and said to me, you know, this is really incredible. Would you work with my son, with my daughter, with my husband, and with me?
Mhm.
And her son was experiencing flashbacks and memories. He was little, right? He was at that time between 5 and 6 years old when I met with him. And he was experiencing moments of memories of just talking about him being Lou Gehrig and Babe Ruth being his friend, right? He would just drop little comments here and there. And he was also at the same time showing incredible talent as a baseball player, which totally comes with the territory, right? With the skill level and talent that Lou Gehrig had. And so the mom was really smart to do two things. Well, I should say, first, it all started by her writing down what he was saying, because she was just blown away. What is happening, right? Because he would just spontaneously drop these memories, and then it'll be like nothing. It'll be just him, little Christian, just continuing forward, being himself. And she was wondering what's happening with him. And she spoke with their priest, and the priest was afraid that he's being possessed. And she was like, of course, my son is not being possessed. And then she looked for other answers. She Googled, she researched, and that's how she came across Jim Tucker. And Jim is a professor at the University of Virginia, where they have a whole department that studies children who spontaneously remember past lives.
Mhm.
And that department was started by Ian Stevenson, who at first was mostly working with kids from India and that region, because for them reincarnation is an acceptable belief. So it's more in the culture. And Jim carried that work. And so when Jim came to meet Christian, as and they did everything that Jim was doing in terms of interview and so forth. Right before leaving, Jim said to the mom, you know what? Usually the child that remembers so vividly a past life so spontaneously usually comes with a parent who is part of that past life. So he said to her, see into past life regression, try and see, because Christian was more connected with his mom. And so, sure enough, she experienced a past life of being the mother of Lou Gehrig. And so working with me, working with another regressionist, she was able to gather so many details, even though Lou Gehrig and his mom are publicly known and there is a lot disclosed about their story. She was able to experience details that are not known, only in her family has been able to confirm only once she reached out and connected with them and was able to tell them, wait, how about this? How about that? So that's why it's a very good experience, if it's exciting to you, to actually do past life regression, because you'll be able to dive into it so much deeper. And so when I met Christian, he was having asthma attacks, right? And so imagine this little boy being rushed into the emergency room pretty much every week because he was having intense asthma attacks. And Lou Gehrig died from the inability to breathe. The muscles were unable to support the body in breathing, and back then they didn't have breathing machines, right? And so it totally made sense how he came with a breathing challenge in this lifetime. And so as I was working with Christian, I said to him, this is a different life. You don't need to have this condition anymore. And sure enough, that was the end of his asthma attacks. And so that was incredibly satisfying. So because this life is so important to you, right? Like something about it is so relevant, something about it choosing to live and choosing to create things differently is so important and valuable. There's more to it that you will discover and you will be engaged in.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. I want to share that I am now really curious about doing my own regression, but I'm also curious about other past lives that I've had too. I have in the past week or two watched the movie Pearl Harbor and other documentaries about it. And when I'm watching these, I'm crying. I just am sobbing. But watching the movie, I had a hard time swallowing and I had a hard time breathing. And I've always been not claustrophobic all the way, but small spaces, being confined was never something I liked. And I would get a lot of anxiety in a situation like that. But I was telling myself, you're safe when I watched the movie. You're safe. That's not happening right now. You're watching a movie. And I just think it's so fascinating how, like you said earlier, how you were experiencing an ailment and you discovered that in your past life. I'm curious because the other benefit I've been getting around learning my past life is it just feels so expansive. It's like if I was there and I'm here, then I'm really not this body. And I really am eternal. So it's kind of lightened up the entire world and everything around me. And so ailments, things like that, I'm curious, what other benefits have you experienced yourself or had the people you work with experience from past life regression, in addition to healing physically and emotionally?
I really so love this question because the answer I'm going to give you is so vague. And the answer is everything.
Yeah.
Because it's very honest and fair to say that I'm not even the same person who started this journey of past life regression, because I have the incredible privilege to learn not only from my own exploration, but from other people every day. I literally have the best front row seat to life unfolding, to the big tapestry of life connecting, to the stories making sense. And one thing that I have learned very early on is when a person comes in and I want to be like, oh, well, you have this challenge. I wonder if this is how it unfolded in another lifetime, if this is the lesson. I'm always wrong, because the soul is so much more creative, so much more profoundly exciting and interconnected. And so it's truly the greatest mystery being unfolding in front of my eyes every day. It's so incredibly fulfilling, because it's not just a matter of discovering a good story. It's also healing. It's transformative. It gives us the big vision of who we are. It answers so many questions. It takes away the fear of death. It clears anxiety, allows us to forgive others, because we understand that this is not the only go around we've had, right? We're willing to give others so much more the benefit of the doubt. We feel so much more connected with life and with animals, because, we've experienced animal lifetimes. We feel safe when we think about extraterrestrials, because we've had lifetimes as extraterrestrials, right? And also the whole thing about forgiveness, it's really very impactful and important to understand, because one sure way to guarantee that a person will be incarnated within a specific group is to hate that group, right? Whether it's a religious group, whether it's a political group, whether it's a person, right? Because especially if it's a person, guaranteed next time around they'll be either your child or you will be there, so that the relationship is working worked through. So all those nuances really, as we work through them, as I watch it with clients and with myself, allow me to lean back and be a little more allowing of life and trusting of life and the mystery of it.
Yeah. So I love that you just talked about how to ensure that you reincarnate with someone, because I wanted to go back when you were telling the story about Christian and how he had reincarnated with his mother. You answered the question that we do reincarnate with other souls over again. I'm curious, how can we tell? Like, are there signs or synchronicities that we can look for to be able to identify if we've reincarnated with someone?
It usually has to do, the strongest sign always has to do with a sense of connection and the sense of, I know this person, sense of comfort. So it's an emotion more than anything else. And it could be a positive emotion, such as, oh, I know this person and I love them. I don't know much about them, but oh my God, it feels like such a cozy vibe with them. Or, who is this person? I cannot stand them. Who do they think they are? Right? That kind of just immediate repulsion. And so it's an emotion and it's a feeling more than anything. But in terms of the story, the best way to go about is to look at the dynamic of the current relationship. What is the challenge? What is the greatest benefit being exchanged between the two people?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so interesting to me because I'm curious about, can you do a past life regression with someone else? Like, can you do like a double regression or like together?
Most definitely. The only catch here is that the two people have to have the same ability to trust the regression experience. So because then there will be a mismatch of willingness and adventure, right? So think of cups. You want to put them together in a team where the two of them are able to carry each other, right? And the other person, versus one being more skilled and more astute, and they're just carrying their partner. So is it possible? Absolutely. It's an incredible experience. I had the privilege of working with a family of 5 sisters, their husbands, some of their children, and this opportunity to see how this incredibly closely knit family has also traveled through other lifetimes was just a fascinating story into itself. But also then to understand, oh, and this is how I fit into this family, right? Like, why me, right? Why not somebody else? And so yeah, it's really fun.
Yeah. Oh, I could just talk forever about this. And I know we're getting short on time, but I have a few more questions. I wanted to jump back to, during your story, you were talking about being more open or accepting or not as afraid of like ETs or other realities. I'm really curious about other time-space realities and how we incarnate there too. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So again, they're simultaneous to this now moment. It's not about linear progression. It's about simultaneous unfoldment. And so it's equally easy to experience other planetary cosmic lifetimes as it is to experience future lifetimes here on Earth, as it is to experience past lives. And so to me, those every time I've got a client through a cosmic lifetime, it was always something personal connected to them, if that makes sense to you. It was never just, oh, let's be a tourist through time and space. It was, let's go to this place because this will explain this and that within me.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is so cool. Yeah, I think maybe we might have to do a whole nother episode on just that alone. And what's really standing out to me right now is how the word simultaneous keeps coming up, and this, concept of time is linear in this time space reality, but everything is really happening now. So when we do a past life regression, are we actually going back, or are we just tapping into those other nows?
Yeah, so when you say going back, what do you mean by that? Because I'm not quite sure what you mean. So I would say, yeah, we're just tapping into
Yeah.
other nows.
Yeah. So when I hear the word regression, I think, going back in time to, history, right? So my past life that I'm aware of ended in the year 1941. But if we're not linear and that's just an illusion, then it's really just another dimension, or like, how would we explain that?
So think of overlapping dimensions. So currently I'm sitting in an apartment, and I live in this apartment with my partner and with our two cats. And this apartment was previously occupied by an older lady, which was my partner's grandmother. And he was here as a little boy. And so even though the layout of the place has changed and the grandma is no longer living here, instead I am here and he's a grown-up man, he has the ability to look into the corner of one room and say, this is where I learned how to dance to MTV songs while watching them on the TV, right? Or he looks at another part of the apartment and he says, oh, this is where grandma used to make me this kind of food and this kind of, right? So those things are alive within him, even though they're not present in the same moment with us. However, in terms of time and space and simultaneity, they are alive, they are present, even though we do not see the apparition of those other people walking through the apartment. We do not see that. It is happening because it's just overlapping. It's the sharpness of our senses, theirs and ours, right, of the two separate timelines, that are so focused on the present now moment that we exclude that other information. But I'm also overlapping, and I'm kind of like a distant future and a possibility to them as well. So imagine grandma talking to her little grandson and saying, someday you're going to find an amazing woman who really loves you. Now, is she connecting with the future probable energy that is available, or is she just dreaming dreams for him? We don't know. That's why so much about signs and things happening is not just such a linear explanation. And I love how you spoke of having those moments of something being different on that day when you woke up. Something was different. And so was it different because the future you, now all these years later, had decided that she's so firmly grounded in the identity of sobriety, so she had sent that signal to the past you and said to her, you can do it, this is doable? Or is it because another lifetime influenced you? We don't know. Literally, the mystery of life is profoundly incredible. Just one of those things where we sit around and we're like, wow, I don't know. It's probably bigger and better than what I can imagine it.
Yeah. I'm having that experience right now listening to you. It's just like, wow, that was so powerful and so beautiful, the way that you explained that overlap and time, because I felt like I could see the picture of it. So that was so beautiful. I know that we're coming up onto time. So is there anything that you want to share before I ask you the 3 questions I ask all my guests?
Oh, I'm curious about the questions now, but let me first share. The
Okay.
point of all of this is so that we trust our power and trust our choices. So karma is not a punishment. Karma is an opportunity for balancing and learning. We cannot learn at all in one lifetime. And mostly the reason why we don't learn at all is because we're kind of asleep at the wheel of life. How many people are really alert and awake that their choices matter, that they're not victims and pushed around by the tidal waves of life, right? But instead, what they choose, what they think, what they decide matters. And that's really the purpose of life. The purpose of life is for us to master our creative energy through mastery of our thoughts and our emotions. And much like any new game, much like learning to drive a car or ride a bike, at first it feels very unfamiliar, right? At first we're just struggling and falling down and figuring it out. And that's where so many of us are. We are literally asleep at the wheel of life, not realizing that we have something to do with what's happening around us and that we can change things. And then, of course, we die, we have a life review, and we say, oh, wait a minute, let me try better next time with a little more power, with a little more awareness. And so eventually we reach a place where your listeners, you and I get to sit down and say, you know what? I'm willing to actually be in charge of my thoughts and emotions. I'm willing to be self-empowered and self-led, because this is the whole point of this game anyway. So let me try it on. And that's how karma comes in, because karma, again, is not punishment. It's just a balancing of missed opportunities, balancing of mislearning, balancing to just see it from a different point of view and try it out differently and see what else we can create, right? And so my message for all of us, myself including, is to remember we're here to play and have fun and take charge, because with that playfulness and fun lies great responsibility, but we can handle it. That's why we're here. Our soul decided we can handle it. So keep working, keep doing the inner work, because it really matters.
Thank you so much for that. And thank you for touching on karma. It was a question that I had that I didn't get to. So the first question that I ask all my guests, and we haven't really touched on this topic, but I'd love to hear what you have to say. How do you define God or source?
You and I combined each of us individually in oneness with all, in connection and field of love and expansion, that much like my earlier analogy of the hand and the finger is both separate and yet together. So to me, God is not a person. To me, God is the experience of being with myself in oneness, but also in life with oneness with life.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Let me tell you a little more about that, because
Yeah.
I feel like a story will be very helpful. So I was eating breakfast one time with Wayne Dyer, and I confessed to him and I said to him, I know you teach that we are God. I know you say that. I have the biggest problem with it. I cannot own that level of power and say I am God. I just really struggle with this. And he said to me, well, can you say I am love? And I said, absolutely. I have no problem with that, right? Of course, I love everyone. I love everything. I love myself. Love is easy for me. He said, there, you just said I'm God. Right?
Yeah. I
Simple.
thank you so much for that. I know I'm studying A Course in Miracles right now. I'm doing the daily lessons, and so much of it points us back to we are God. And I have the very same struggle, like, but I'm not God, but I can say I'm love. So I really appreciate that story. Thank you so much. The next question, you just kind of talked about it. So if there's anything to elaborate, the second question I ask all my guests is, what is the purpose of life?
Yes. The purpose of life is I already spoke of it, so I'm just going to give you a very different answer, even though both answers are the answers, right? The purpose of life is to love ourselves so profoundly and deeply, to give to ourselves that which we say is missing, because that's the only way we can create the change within ourselves, but also in the quantum field and in the mind of God. So if we feel that we're abandoned by people, don't abandon yourself, right? And give yourself the commitment, the love, the listening. And then, of course, that error, of course, it's not an error, but you understand, in terms of software programming language, gets corrected in the field, in the whole system, and the whole system is now upgraded and elevated. So that which is missing, give it to yourself.
That is so profound.
Thank you.
The last question is, if you could give if you could take one piece of wisdom that you have now and offer it to a younger version of yourself, what would that piece of wisdom be?
It will always be the same thing, even though I knew it even back then, but it'll be still the same thing till I die. Trust, trust, trust. Trust yourself that you've got it, that into the depth of who you are. You're loving, you're powerful, you're safe. Trust life to always take care of you, to show up for you. Trust the universe that it has a bigger plan than what you can ever imagine and execute on your own, that you're not alone, that it's all a current taking you there. So just keep trusting.
Trusting.
Yeah.
I will do that. Thank you so much. How do people get in touch with you if they want to work with you?
Yes, please reach out to me at info@Mira Kelley. And the Kelly is spelled just like your version of Kelly and my version. I have to tell you, you're the only other Kelly I have ever met other than my family, right? With the spelling of EY. And so please reach out to me at info@mirakelley.com. And I look forward to working with you one-on-one through past life regression, through coaching, all the things. And so, yeah. Yes.
Okay. So if you want to use the code Chrissy, go ahead and use the code for a little discount to work with Mira.
Absolutely. Let me know.
Mira, this has been so much fun, and I'm so grateful for you and the work that you're doing. I just love talking to people who are living out their passions, and I just want to thank you so much for sharing your heart and your wisdom with the world, and also for spending time with me today. Thank you so, so much. It's been so fun.
Thank you. Thank you. I really loved it. Thank you.
I would like to personally thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you haven't already, please be sure to like this episode, subscribe to my channel, and turn on notifications so that you never miss a beat. And if you really resonated with this content, please share it with all of your friends so that collectively we can expand our consciousness. Have a very blessed week.